Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Council meeting of the 24th of February 2025. I'd like to thank those of you who attended the smoking ceremony and the Welcome to Country outside the Civic Centre just now. It's always a profound and meaningful ceremony to witness. And I would like to now welcome Wurundjeri man Colin Hunter IV to perform the Welcome to Country to commence our first Council meeting of 2025.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome. It is my honour and privilege to be here tonight. My name is Colin Hunter IV. I would like to start off by acknowledging that this evening we are on Wurundjeri country, home of my ancestors and also home to everybody here today. I wish to pay my respects to both elders past, present and emerging, elders from all nations, especially all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community members joining us here today. Wurundjeri is a part of the Kulin Nation and of the Wurrung language group. Wurundjeri country extends from the inner city of Melbourne across to the Great Dividing Range, west to the Werribee River, south to the Mordialloc Creek and east to Mount Baw Baw. A big thank you to everybody who has helped make this event possible this evening. Wominjeka, welcome, and I hope everybody has a fantastic night ahead. Thank you very much and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Colin Hunter IV. My name is Councillor Sophie Tawney and I am the Mayor of Boroondara City Council. Before I introduce my fellow councillors, I'd just like to say a few words. 105 days ago, this new council was sworn in. In that time, we've listened, we've acted, and we've begun shaping the decisions that will define this term. Every one of those days has mattered, because every decision, big or small, plays a part in shaping the future of our community. Today marks the beginning of a new council year, a chance to build on that foundation, to lead with purpose, and to make decisions that will stand the test of time. Good governance means asking the difficult questions, challenging assumptions, and ensuring that every decision is made with the best interests of our entire community in mind. It's about facing tough issues head-on, considering all perspectives, and striving for solutions that create real, lasting progress for our community and for our environment. As we step into this new year of council, let's keep sight of what brought us here, a commitment to service, to integrity, and to the people who trust us to lead. I'll now introduce my fellow councillors. On my left of the horseshoe table is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Shimmer Abuki, Councillor Wes Galt, Councillor Michael Nolan, Councillor Felicity Simfield, Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Mal Osborne-Smith, Councillor John Friend Pereira, and Councillor Chris Pattis. I would also like to acknowledge that we have here tonight 3 former councillors of the Boroondara Council. We have Nick Stavrou, Di Gillies, and Jane Addis. Welcome. Oh, and behind me, on my left shoulder, we have Councillor Rob Baillieu, who is attending this evening's meeting by video link. Thank you. I also acknowledge in attendance this evening our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Philip Storer, and our Manager of Governance and Legal, Mr. Brian Wee. There are other officers in attendance tonight and they will be introduced as required. Please note the council meeting is being live streamed on the council YouTube page, so you can watch proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting will also be recorded and made available on the council website as soon as practicable after the meeting. I'll now move to apologies. Mr. Wee, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are no apologies this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wee. We'll move to the first item on our agenda, the adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the 9th and the 16th of December. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Friend Pereira?
Yeah, I'll move that motion, Mayor.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galt?
Seconded, Mayor.
Councillors, is anyone opposed? I will now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the motion carried. We'll now move on to the second item, declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officers. Councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that you wish to foreshadow for the matters on the agenda tonight? So we'll now move on to item 3, deputations and presentations, petitions and public submissions. Mr. Wee, are there any petitions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have 3 petitions, one in relation to installation of nets at St James Oval, one in relation to the redevelopment of the Greythorn Park Sports Pavilion, and the last, an objection to parking restrictions on Harrington Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Wee. Councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion in relation to the petitions as appearing on the screen? Councillor Friend Pereira?
I'm happy to move the officers' recommendations.
And do I have a seconder? Councillor Osborne-Smith?
Yes, happy to second that, thank you.
I'll now put the motion. Oh, councillors, is anyone opposed? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried unanimously. Now we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, informal meetings of councillors. Councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion in relation to informal meetings of councillors as appearing on screen? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So moved as it was circulated. Thank you.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Nolan.
Yeah, happy to second.
Councillors, is anyone opposed? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We will now move on to item 5, public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 noon will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a response in writing. Those submitted after 12 p.m. will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a more comprehensive written response to be provided in due course. Mr. Wee, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have 14 submissions by 7 committee members.
Thank you for the questions. One question has been disallowed and the remaining questions have been allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules. All allowed questions will receive a written response in due course if not already. Councillors, given the number of public questions that we have received this evening, we are likely to exceed the allocated 15 minutes as per the Governance Rules. Can I please have a motion to extend the time allocated to allow us to answer all questions this evening? Councillor Hollingsworth?
Sorry, left my light on.
Councillor Friend Pereira?
I'm happy to move a motion to provide more time for the public question time.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Osborne-Smith?
Yes, happy to second that, thank you.
I will. Councillors, is anyone opposed?
What's the motion?
The motion is... Mr. Wee, has it got a time in there? I'll put it up.
We don't need the time, we just say to extend the time allocated.
Councillors, can I please have a motion to extend the time allocated to allow us to answer all the questions this evening? That's the motion that's been put. Is anyone opposed? All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. First question, Ian Hundley. Subject is public consultation on Greythorn Park Sports Pavilion. The question is, will Council now undertake to recalibrate public consultations on the proposed sports pavilion in Greythorn Park at the concept stage consistent with the previous Council undertaking, rather than as attempted at the Council drop-in session conducted at Greythorn Park on December the 9th, 2024, to publicly present the project in all but final form? I call upon the Director of Community Services to respond to this question.
Thank you, Mayor. Council conducted consultation for Greythorn Park Pavilion from the 26th of November 2024 to the 4th of February 2025 for a total of 10 weeks. Information was published on Burundara's Your Say webpage, and the consultation included an on-site community drop-in session on the 9th of December. We're currently reviewing all the consultation received, and will continue to inform the committee on the development of the draft design. And we'll also continue to stay engaged with key stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Mr Huntley. Second question, Mr Huntley. Subject is Proposed Transport Advisory Committee. Having regard for the importance of transport in all its forms, including for the environment, the allocation of public and private space, and the costs incurred by household, will Council now take a comprehensive approach to transport requirements in Boroondara by establishing a Community Transport Advisory Committee with appropriate external representation to address the full range of transport modes, including private passenger motor transport, all public transport modes, walking and cycling, as well as freight transport? I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Council, at its meeting of the 16th of December 2024, considered a report to consider and endorse the advisory committees and appointments policies to formally appoint councillors to council advisory committees, community advisory committees and external management committees, external boards, industry associations and partnership groups. A community transport advisory committee was not part of the range of committees for council consideration at that time, and it may be a future consideration of council. Council is, however, a member of the Metropolitan Transport Forum and is represented by a councillor and an officer at the monthly meetings held in the City of Melbourne. The Metropolitan Transport Forum is a local government interest group for transport in Metropolitan Melbourne, and its purpose is to advocate for better transport, specifically to work towards effective, efficient and equitable transport in Metropolitan Melbourne by providing a forum for debate, research and policy development and sharing and disseminating information to improve transport choices.
Thank you, Mr Free, and thank you for your question, Mr Huntley. The third question is from Rachel, and the subject is delivery trucks at Taronga Village. Please advise what steps Council is taking to stop the illegal unloading of delivery trucks at Taronga Village. This has been an ongoing issue for a year. Not only is it dangerous with trucks parking in no stopping areas against the flow of traffic, but it happens very early, 3 a.m, etc., and disturbs local residents. Elderly residents have been asked to photograph the offending trucks in the dark at great personal risk to try to solve the issue. I call upon the Director of Urban Living to respond to this question.
Thanks, Mayor. Council is aware of the concerns and, in fact, we undertook an investigation and enforcement in late 2024, which resulted in improved compliance and a reduction in early morning deliveries outside of the permitted hours under the amenity local law. Further non-compliances were recently identified in January this year, and we identified those following a complaint and further investigations that were undertaken. The offending businesses within the Taronga Village Shopping Centre have now been identified and issued warnings, with one business also being issued with a notice to comply. And contact has been made with the complainant to provide an update.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Rachel. Next question is from Peter, and the subject is public submissions for the Sports Pavilion at Greythorn Park. For the public submissions on the draft proposal for the Sports Pavilion at Greythorn Park, which closed on 4th of February, in regards to question 11 concerning the adequacy of information on this consultation page, how many responses were for 3 thumbs, good, for 2 thumbs, fair, for 1 thumb, unsatisfactory, and for questions not answered? I call upon the Director of Community Services to respond to this question.
Thank you, Mayor. Of the over 200 people who responded, 21 people did not answer the question, 45 rated it 1 thumb, unsatisfactory, 59 rated it 2 thumbs, fair, and 80 people rated it 3, good. On average, survey respondents rated the amount of information on the consultation page a 2.19 out of 3. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Peter. The next question is from Jane Addis. The subject, Kew Library and Kew Recreation Centre. Why are councillors seeking to commit ratepayers' money to gain further expert opinions and reports for Kew Library and Kew Recreation Centre when such opinions have been obtained recently? I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Council will be considering responses to two separate notices of motion tonight, one on the Kew Library redevelopment and the second on the Kew Recreation Centre heat pump technology. Given these matters will be discussed by councillors this evening, I'm not in a position to provide any further response.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Ms Addis. Second question from Jane Addis, subject Kew Library and Kew Recreation Centre. Are councillors requesting further reports when there is already recent and clear expert and independent advice about the best way to manage these projects because they do not like the expert advice already provided? I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Through you, Madam Mayor, as per my previous response to Ms Addis, these matters are subject to discussion at tonight's council meeting.
Thank you for your question, Ms Addis. Question from Ian Hundley. Subject, bus interchanges on the Eastern Freeway. Please advise of progress in council negotiations with the Victorian Government for the establishment of bus interchanges to benefit Boroondara residents as route bus patrons, to enable them to transfer between east-west route bus services on the Eastern Freeway busway, now under construction, with the north-south services at Burke Road and Chandler Highway, and to thus also reduce the requirement for space inefficient car travel and associated public parking facilities. I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Council negotiations with the Victorian Government about the Eastern Busway are ongoing and include advocacy for a stop at Chandler Highway and Burke Road intersections. The Chandler Highway is part of the Hoddle Street to Burke Road West Works package, with the Momentum Consortium announced as the preferred bidder earlier this year. We look forward to further conversations with Momentum about the design of the Eastern Busway and an inclusion of a stop at Chandler Highway should they be the successful tenderer for this package. The Burke Road is the border between the works packages, with both being able to consider and potentially deliver a stop for the Eastern Busway. Conversations are progressing with the Eastern Freeway Burke to Tram Alliance, who are responsible for the Burke to Tram Road section of the project. As with the potential Chandler Highway stop, we look forward to further conversations.
Thank you, and thank you, Ian, for your question. Mr Hundley, for your question. The next question is from Gregory. Subject is Kew Recreation Centre. Do the design criteria for the Kew Recreation Centre swimming pool include measures to reduce heat loss, in particular covering the pool at all times when not in use, to reduce evaporative heat loss, which can account for 50% or more of heat loss, radiation heat loss, which can account for 30% or more of heat loss, and convection heat loss? I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The design for the Kew Recreation Centre has comprehensively considered ways to reduce heat loss in its building design and the aquatic areas. The heat loss from pools is reduced by maintaining the air temperature above the pools to within 1 degree of the pool water temperature and reducing evaporative heat loss. This is the way our centre has been designed and negates the need for the pools to be covered directly.
Thank you. And next question is from Ian Hundley, the subject Greythorn Park Master Plan. Having regard for the fact that Greythorn Park is much treasured by park users since its establishment under the 1997 Greythorn Park Master Plan, which was developed with the close involvement of local residents, and the master plan was permitted to lapse several years ago by previously elected councils, will the council now take prompt action to refresh the master plan, again with full resident involvement, to ensure that the character of Greythorn Park is retained for future use and enjoyment of local residents? I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council manages its parks and reserves in accordance with the principles and the aims of the Boroondara Open Space Strategy. One of the aims of this strategy is that the open space network is accessible to the Boroondara community, including people of all ages, abilities, health, gender and cultural background. The Greythorn Park Master Plan from 1997 was largely delivered and saw the transformation of the park from a dual sports ground location to a park with one sports ground and more diverse offerings for our broad community. While it has expired, it is still a reference point when there is development in the park, such as the current pavilion renewal project. There is no intention to revise the master plan, as there is no community driver for significant changes to the park at this stage. This will be reconsidered as part of a new open space strategy, as it is delivered likely over the next 2 years.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr Huntley, for your question. The next question is from Gregory, and the subject is Kew Recreation Centre heat pumps. Concerning Kew Recreation Centre, how efficient is the heat pump when operating on cold winter nights for heating the swimming pool versus resistive electric heating? I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When the outside temperatures are below 5 degrees Celsius, the resistive electric heating is more efficient and effective than electric heat pumps. This would only be for an estimated 200 hours per annum. During other times, heat pumps are more efficient than resistive electric heating. Heat pumps can also be supplemented with additional starter pumps. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Gregory. Next question is from Stephen Main, and the subject is transparency and public questions. Is the new council broadly reviewing Boroondara's transparency, disclosure and accountability? For instance, why are the processes for asking public questions and making submissions at Boroondara Council meetings more restrictive than many other councils, and will this be reviewed? By way of comparison, City of Melbourne has 15 minutes set aside for public questions at both the start and the end of their twice monthly Future Melbourne Committee meetings, and there are no constraints on anyone asking walk-up, live, unscripted questions on the night. I call upon the Manager of Governance and Legal to respond to this question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, Council has established a new Governance Advisory Committee which will consider issues relating to transparency, including public questions and public submissions to Council.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Mr Main. Next question is from Stephen Main, subject Council Property Holdings. The latest annual report disclosed that we had a record $3.394 billion in land holdings as at June 30, 2024, after $30.46 million of disposals in the 2023-24 financial year, and a position valuation uplift of $47.5 million. Land is our biggest asset holding, yet we don't disclose much about it. Will Council provide itemised disclosure on the most valuable property holdings in the 2024-25 annual report, noting Manningham lists its 20 most valuable properties in the annual report each year? Could this even be disclosed in the next quarterly report, seeing as there is no mention of changes to land valuation in tonight's quarterly report item? I call upon the Chief Financial Officer to respond to this question.
Thank you, Mayor. Council can consider including the top 20 properties in the 24-25 annual report, although this would be a reference to the valuation data for any property listed. Obtaining the valuation data for each individual property would actually incur additional costs to the ratepayer. Additionally, disclosing this information may actually compromise Council's negotiating position if we were to sell any property in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Mr Main. Next question is from Nick Stavrou, subject Kew Library and Recreation Centre reports. Given the complexities and many unanswered questions surrounding proposals 7.6 and 7.7, and given that there appears to be no time constraint, could you please clarify why these proposals weren't brought before the Services Delegated Committee, where the community could provide direct input and gain confidence that the process is transparent? If this was an oversight, could you commit to bringing them before the committee? I call upon the Manager of Governance and Legal to respond to this question.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, Reports 7.6 and 7.7 on tonight's agenda were brought to this council meeting by council resolutions on 9 December 2023 in response to notices of motion at that meeting. The future disposition of these matters will be dealt with by council this evening.
Thank you for your question, Mr Stavrou. Next question, Nick Stavrou, broader Kew Recreation Centre issues. Given that the economic and environmental factors haven't significantly changed since the previous evaluation, and considering the unresolved issues with the Kew Recreation Centre, shouldn't these broader issues be resolved before proceeding with the heat pump proposal? This would ensure that any decisions are made with full knowledge and prioritise the most responsible use of resources. I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces to respond to this question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given the report that is being considered tonight in respect to the heat pump technology, we're not in a position to respond to it. I will say, however, the Kew Recreation Centre project is once again back under construction and is not subject to the report tonight.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Mr Stavrou. Now we move to item 6 on the agenda, notices of motion. Mr Wee, do we have any notices of motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are no notices of motion this evening.
Thank you. Now we move to item 7 on the agenda, the presentation of officers' reports. 7.1, the MAV pilot project. Before I hand over to Fiona Brown, Manager of Community Development, to introduce this item, I would like to acknowledge that we are joined in chamber by representatives from the Murnong First Peoples Gathering Place, by Uncle Charles Pacania from Aboriginal News, by the Burundara Reconciliation Network and the Municipal Association of Victoria, who would be partners in the MAV pilot project. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, the purpose of tonight's report is to seek Council's endorsement to participate in the Municipal Association of Victoria's Strengthening Council's Treaty Awareness and Information Pilot Project. The Victorian Government and First Nations people, through the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, have been working on a truth and treaty process for a number of years. Under the treaty framework and process, the Victorian Government will negotiate a statewide treaty as well as local traditional owner treaties. To promote understanding and awareness of the treaty process, the Municipal Association of Victoria has invited the City of Burundara and a rural council to be involved in a pilot project. The pilot aims to firstly build awareness and understanding of the Victorian treaty process for local government organisations and clarify what it might mean at the local level of government. And secondly, to facilitate informed and respectful conversations with local communities by providing facts about the treaty process. It's important to note that the pilot project is not about adopting or promoting a yes-no position regarding treaty, but rather to provide factual information about the process, the reasons informing it, and to increase understanding with a view to promoting respectful dialogue. The pilot partners include the Municipal Association of Victoria, 2 participating councils, including Burundara, the First Peoples Assembly, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation, Victorian Aboriginal News, Reconciliation Victoria, as well as the Burundara Reconciliation Network and the Murnong First Peoples Gathering Place. Council's participation in the pilot project will be as a partner enabling opportunities and processes to support engagement with the Burundara community on the treaty process. The pilot will be completed by June 2025. The learnings from the pilot will be applied to develop a successful model when engaging with other Victorian communities at the local level. So the next steps are subject to council endorsement. The first element of the project, which is a briefing workshop for councillors, staff and elders, will be held this Thursday, the 27th of February. So the recommendation is on the screen, and that is the council resolves to endorse participation in the Municipal Association of Victoria's Strengthening Council's Treaty Awareness and Information Pilot Project. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Not a question, but at the appropriate time, I would like to move the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with the objective of this pilot project, which is to raise awareness in our community, knowledge and awareness. What I'm uncomfortable with is that there doesn't seem to be, in the report, it doesn't seem to capture how we're going to measure in the pilot program, how it will be measured, whether we in fact have increased organisational community knowledge and awareness. I very much believe that if you measure something...
What's your question, Councillor Pattis?
So my question is, the report and the recommendation does not detail how this pilot will measure whether in fact the pilot has been successful, i.e. to achieve the two objectives.
So the question is, how will it measure, the measurement question? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so what we will do before the project is that we will measure people's understanding of treaty, and then at the conclusion of the project and probably the workshops that we undertake, we will ask people if their awareness of treaty has increased as a result of those workshops.
Any further questions?
I might just also jump in if I could, Mayor, just to say that remembering this is a pilot, so what this project is aiming to do is to take learnings about what worked in terms of building awareness and what didn't, in order to be able to then roll that out in other community settings. So it's to learn what works.
Thank you. Any further questions? If there are no further questions, Councillor, is anyone prepared to move a motion? Councillor Hollingsworth.
I'd like to move the recommendation on the screen. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Abuki.
Happy to second.
To help assist, is anyone opposed? No. Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, I'd like to thank the officers for bringing this to our attention and liaising with MAV. I believe that this would be a very good opportunity for Burundara Council to work with our First Nations people. We developed a very good relationship many years back, and I'm pleased to say that in the last council term, I was one of the councillors on the Burundara Reconciliation Advisory Committee, worked with council to develop the reconciliation strategy, and was at the launch the day that we celebrated that strategy with many of our Wurundjeri Wurrung people and people representative of agency. And in fact, Councillor Franco, Councillor Gott, myself, and at that moment in time, Councillor Stavru were there. And it was wonderful to be a part of something that is helping to educate not just council, but our community. And I look forward to seeing what this pilot delivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Thank you, officers. We'll now move to item 7.2, the Advisory Committee and Appointments Policy Update. This item will be introduced by Brian Wee, Manager of Governance and Legal.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. This report seeks to amend the Advisory Committee and Appointments Policy, which was adopted by Council on 16 December 2024. The amendments are to add in terms of reference and membership for a Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee, for Councillor Fren Pereira to join the Budget Process Review Advisory Committee, and to correct some typographical errors and name changes within the report, together with one other name change that's been identified since the report.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion? Councillor Abuki.
Thank you. I'd like to move a motion that Council resolves to vary the Council resolution of 27th of February 2023 to allow 6 councillors to be appointed to the Governance Advisory Committee as a departure in that committee's terms of reference.
Just temporarily vanished from the screen.
Councillor Abuki, while we're waiting for that to appear, do you want to retain the existing officer's recommendation, add that as an addition, or?
I
Yes, I'd
think
also
councillor
like
says that, yeah, sorry.
to appoint Councillor Tawney to the Governance Advisory Committee. Adopt the amended Advisory Committee and Appointments Policy as annexed to the minutes, which include the amendments in Resolution 1 and 2, new terms of reference for the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee in Appendix 3 of the draft policy, new councillor appointments to advisory committees as included in Appendix 1 of the draft policy attached to the council report.
Thank you. Would anyone like to second that motion? Councillor Galt.
I'm very happy to second it, thank you.
To assist the mover, is there anyone opposed? I'd like to put that motion, Councillor Abuki, do you want to speak? No. I'd like to put that motion. All those in favour? I declare that motion carried. We now move to item 7.3. The contract 2024/72 data centre refresh. This item will be introduced by David English, Chief Transformation and Technology Officer. Thank you. Introduced by Nigel.
Through the Chair, this report seeks council endorsement for the awarding of contract number 2024/72. Council's data centre is currently physically located upstairs, along with further equipment located at the City of Melbourne. It hosts the majority of Council's technology solutions and is provided for both internal staff and the community. This infrastructure is coming to an end and either requires replacement or a transition to a managed solution off premises. The proposed contract will allow the migration of the data centre to a hosted off-site cloud-based solution. A cloud-based strategy is in line with our 2019-24 IT strategy plan. The proposed data centre is located within Australia and ensures it meets the highest level of global data centre security policies, including cybersecurity and privacy, risk management and compliance. The solutions provider has also implemented similar solutions at neighbouring councils. The data centre to be used has been certified as 100% carbon neutral since 2018 under the Australian Government Climate Active Program. The contract is for 5 years, which is best practice for cloud migrations and allows for upfront payments, and over a 5-year period, it goes down per year. The awarding of this contract will be an overall reduction to our current on-site infrastructure prices. It is recommended that Council award the proposed contract.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As someone who has worked in the technology industry for over 35 years, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with a 5-year contract because this is an industry which is extremely competitive and also which changes almost every year. So my question through you to officers is, would there be any detriment if we were to reduce the contract period to something that was still acceptable, but that allowed us, say, every 2 years to go out to contract again? I just believe things change very, very quickly.
Through the Chair, our investigations found that the 5 years was the best practice. This is due to the upfront costs in that first year. If we were to go to a 3-year, we'd be having to start to investigate at the 18-month mark and also have upfront costs should we move to another provider. When you have a look at the confidential figures, and I'm not going to talk about them now, but you'll notice that there is an upfront cost in year 1, and then it comes down, down, down. When we went out to tender, we asked for 5 years, and that's what the feedback has been provided by the tender responses.
Madam Mayor, I'm uncomfortable in supporting this in an open forum because I want to ask some questions in a confidential forum. So I don't know if anyone wants to, I'm happy to move it to the confidential part because there are questions that I want to ask that might bring up commercial in confidence issues.
Madam Chair, if we move to confidential session, there is another item that I'm keen to move into confidential as well, so we could do both together.
We have to have a reason, though, to move it.
It's dealing with confidential, commercial in confidence material as well.
So my suggestion is we defer both confidential matters to the end of the list because we've got a number of public here today, and I think we'll move forward onto the other items and we'll come back to this in a confidential meeting.
Happy to move a deferral, if that's what you need.
Do you need to move?
Do you need a motion?
Thank you, Councillor Pattis. Okay, so I need someone, Councillor Pattis, you happy to move a motion proceeding to next business? Can I have a seconder? That? Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Is anyone opposed? All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next item of business. Item 7.4, the December 2024 Quarterly Performance Report. This item will be introduced by Nigel Morris, Director of Customer and Transformation. Thank you.
Through the Chair, each quarter Council produces a quarterly performance report which outlines our financial performance, non-financial performance and progresses towards the Burundara Community Plan. Tonight we're presenting the October to December 2024 Quarterly Performance Report. Reporting on the December 24 Quarterly Performance Report is against the 24-25 amended budget as approved by Council in September 24. The overall financial position as at the 31st of December 2024 remains on track. The year-to-date surplus result of $135 million is tracking favourably, slightly above the year-to-date budget of $125 million. This is due to timing differences for both income and expenditure across Council, but it's expected to reduce as we continue to deliver services for our community throughout the year. At the 16th of December 24 Council meeting, a motion was passed requesting that trend indicators be included where possible in future quarterly reports to demonstrate our performance compared to previous years. In response to this amendment, all local government performance reporting frameworks, the LGPRF measures, now include a 4-year trend data, and all strategic indicators, including direct comparison to results of a corresponding quarter for the previous financial year, are provided where they can be compared. Overall, Council is tracking on track with its progress towards major initiatives, strategic indicators and LGPRF measures. Details of any measures that are not on track to meet target by the end of the financial year have been detailed in the covering report. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Friend-Pereira.
I just wish to foreshadow I intend to move an amendment to the officer's report. Officer's recommendation.
You mean a motion? Yes, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Friend-Pereira, would you like to?
Thank you. I think we have the text to go up on the screen. Essentially, I'm suggesting a third bullet point be added, which would say that we would publish and publicise using appropriate communication channels the quarterly performance report on Council's website, including a progressive summary of key performance areas and trend graphs.
Just wait a moment, it's coming. Thank you. Councillors, do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the interests of accountability and transparency, I'd like to second this.
Thank you. To assist the mover, is there anyone opposed? Councillor Friend-Pereira, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, very briefly. The quarterly performance report is a crucial document, as we've just heard, which gives a snapshot of our performance in time, as well as now going back 4 years against key indicators. But most importantly, it is already published. The problem is that it's published in the meeting section as an attachment to various reports. So the intent here is to try and elevate it up and bring more attention to it, as I think we are a customer service and service focused organisation, and the QPR really helps both councillors but also the members of the public see how council is performing and the excellent work that has been achieved.
Thank you. Councillor Pattis, noting there's no opposition, is a seconder? No. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Thank you. We will now move to agenda item 7.5, contract variations. Is this the one you would like to discuss in a closed? What's the thing I do? He did. Councillor Franco, can you confirm this is the matter you would like to defer?
Yes, I'd like the opportunity to go into closed session.
Councillor Franco, are you prepared to move a motion to proceed to next business?
If we need a motion.
We do.
Okay.
Councillor Hollingsworth, you happy to second that?
I'm happy to second, thank you.
Anyone opposed? All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Moving on to the next item of business, 7.6, Kew Library, implications of varying the contracted architectural work. This item will be introduced by Daniel Freer, Director of Places and Spaces, and Kate McCackey, Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Mayor. This report responds to Council's 9th of December 2024 notice of motion regarding the Kew Library project, including looking at alternate options and the contract implications of this. So I'm going to start off just by talking about kind of what's at the heart of this project, which is really the service outcomes. And when we talk about service outcomes, we're really talking about community outcomes and drivers. So just bear with us as we just run through some of the critical drivers that are informing such an important project. Last year, Boroondara Libraries welcomed some 925,000 visitors through its doors, and some 37,000 people participated in our library programs. We also had 61,000 active library members, approximately 35% of Boroondara's population. And as part of this, the Kew Library had nearly 132,000 visits, with over 5,200 people participating in library programs. And these figures illustrate how libraries are no longer just about books and buildings, but they have evolved as active and thriving community hubs combining literature, lifelong learning, technology, culture, the arts, economic development, and perhaps most important of all, social connection. And on this last point, libraries are playing an increasing role in our health and wellbeing, particularly around that social connection and healthy outcomes. In 2023, 18% of adult Boroondara residents experienced loneliness. And by 2041, the number of lone and two-person households within the municipality is expected to increase by nearly 53%. And the 2021 census identified mental health as only second to asthma as a long-term health condition in Boroondara, and this was the same for Kew. And so this project is not just about a library, it's about how as a city we're going to provide services and social infrastructure which address these really significant critical issues in our community for current populations and future generations. The current facility poses the following challenges in terms of delivering great service outcomes. The first is that the current layout has limited capacity to hold concurrent programs and activities. And moving forward, the floor plate flexibility is central to the library service being able to evolve and act as a community hub and address these bigger issues I've just talked about, that being social isolation and community connection. Plus, the library's unique parkland location and connection to the immediate outdoors is a major opportunity for better health and wellbeing programming. And we really want to, that's what our vision design brief talks about, how do we really get people outdoors exercising and leveraging a major community facility to do that. Secondly, the co-joined shelving and lighting has restricted the ability to create flexible multi-purpose spaces, as shelves are unable to be moved. Noise levels are also a challenge as we receive frequent complaints from quiet study areas about noise travelling from the children's area at the opposite end of the library. Third, there are no current dedicated program spaces. The children's area is used for story times, but all other programs are held in the adjacent Phyllis Hall meeting room, which impacts on the community's booking and access to this room, and there is huge demand for community spaces within the library service. And fourth, the Kew Historical Society's presence at the library, whilst offering huge benefits through their events and for people accessing their extensive collection, the footprint is also a limiting factor in terms of having a flexible service delivery. But I would like to acknowledge here that the Kew Historical Society have been a patient partner on this journey since the project commenced in 2017, and we will continue to work with them as the project progresses. Hence, this report recommends demolition of the Kew Library building and creation of a new fit-for-purpose library, which will deliver the following service outcomes. Improve customer experiences with better layout and flow of the library floor plan, which will allow us to meet community needs and evolve as they do over time. Welcoming spaces which are more accessible for people with mobility issues. Comfortable spaces, warm in winter and cool in summer. Flexible shelving and furniture layouts and great Wi-Fi connection. Spaces that support a hub of activity and a meeting place, as well as spaces for reading, study, lifelong learning and economic development. And an engaging environment inside and out, utilising the library's unique location adjacent to the Alexandra Gardens, Petrie Square and within the major Kew Junction Activity Centre. And I'll now pass to Daniel, Director of Places and Spaces.
Thank you, Kate. An analysis of the building condition, compliance and renewal needs alongside service requirements confirm that the best value for money solution, both financially and functionally, is a full demolition and build. The building fails to meet current standards with respect to the building code, accessibility, sustainability, and faces infrastructure condition challenges. The majority of the roof was found to be in poor condition and requires replacement. Circulation spaces and door openings are too narrow for mobility support users, and there are no compliant access to staff offices or level 1 spaces. The fire services are compromised, relying on an external booster at Trinity Grammar, and the structural layout restricts flexible and open space programming. Essential upgrades such as replacing cast iron sewer pipes would cause major disruptions, while the ageing heating and cooling system requires significant upgrades, including a switchboard and site-wide power supply upgrade to transition to an all-electric system. Recognising these challenges, Council endorsed the vision and design brief on the 25th of March 2024 and resolved to demolish and rebuild the library. Council has since awarded a contract to Studio Hollenstein for architectural and consultancy services aligned with this vision. The alternative options presented in response to the 9th of December notice of motion shows that to address compliance matters and functional improvements of the facility, the cost of the project would be over $20 million. Consistent with the major refurbishment option from the earlier 2024 investigations, option A from the notice of motion at $22.32 million sees a compliant building, however, has limited ability to fully achieve the desired functionality improvements relating to flexible and innovative spaces. Options B through to D do not fully address building compliance, including accessibility requirements under the Disability Discrimination Act and the National Construction Code. Additionally, fire services remain non-compliant, lacking upgraded fire hose reels and a dedicated booster, failing to meet current standards. The functional community outcomes articulated in the vision and design brief would be compromised and not fully delivered under these options. The cost of these options, as identified in the report, range in the order from $7 million to $14 million, noting a requirement to address these matters at a later date. If the project was paused completely, minor works would be required and have been withheld over recent times, such as painting, floor linings, interim roof repairs and general maintenance, which is in the order of $970,000. For these reasons, the demolition and rebuild option provides the best value for the community, delivering a fully compliant, future-proof facility with high sustainability performance and strong integration with the surrounding precinct, including the Alexandra Gardens. The officer recommendation is on the screen and commended to you. Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Sinfield.
No question, but I'm ready with a motion when the time is right.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan.
I'd like to foreshadow moving an amended motion.
Or a motion, because there is no motion at this point. Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, officers. My question relates to comments from both your reports about flexibility of footprint. I have read with interest the report and, of course, inspected the building and looked at the plans for the proposal. And I'm wondering if you could explain for my benefit and my fellow councillors how the existing footprint is less flexible, to use your words, both of your words, to the proposal.
So one of the big challenges of the current library is that the shelving and the lighting is wired into each other, so you can't actually move the shelving at all. It's not on wheels, but regardless, it's wired in. So that means we just have a fixed, and we've had it since the 1980s, a fixed floor plan, and that really limits how we can move furniture around the space to create different types of spaces for different types of programs, which evolve over time. And the other thing is, because it is a large hall, there is really only one dedicated separate large meeting room, which is the Phyllis Hall room. We don't have any other programming space per se, which kind of limits the types of programs you can offer at any one time, because it's just one big open space.
Councillor Gold.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It's probably fair to say it is one big, clear, open space. And can I just confirm there are no columns in that big, clear, open space?
That's correct. The structure of the building as it is a hall with columns on the extremities of the hall. And then there has been additions put on to the outside of that. So the large, effectively the former hall in the middle is open space, well, currently occupied by shelving, but is not impacted by the columns.
And is it therefore then fair to say that if the shelving was replaced and the wiring was replaced, say with an overhead grill or grid, it could become a flexible space?
Yeah, it certainly could become more flexible, but you would still have a limited number of kind of divided multi-purpose programming space. They could be added in through walls, etc., but you'd still have a limited number of sort of flexible spaces. Really importantly, when we've gone to the community, they've said that they want vibrant, active, engaging spaces that are noisy and lots of people getting together, and they also want quiet spaces where people can study and work. So it's very hard to do that when you have one big open floor plan.
Councillor Abuki.
Thank you for the report and the history. I would just like to ask a question around the disruption to the public. So if we were to do a demolish and rebuild, would we relocate community groups to nearby council facilities? Would we be able to offer like a pop-up library or something like that? Is there any advantage with a staged refurbish approach where we would be able to keep communities in the building as well as some library functionality while there was a renovation?
From a construction perspective, a knockdown rebuild of a new library would be in the order of 18 months of impact. The plan in that scenario is to provide temporary facilities at the Kew Seniors Centre, I believe is the building, which would provide a more restricted library service, but nonetheless a service to the area of Kew through that period of time. Should renovation works happen to the existing building, there are periods of time where the building would be required to be closed, and again, those temporary facilities would need to be established through those periods of closure. So there may be, for instance, if there are significant works to the roofing, rewiring of the site and the like, there may be periods of 6 months of those works being undertaken, and that temporary facilities would be required. Just to say, we've undertaken this same approach. The Baldwin Library is the most recent of those where we provided temporary facilities while that work was undertaken.
Thank you. And on the topic of the Baldwin Library, I thought the Baldwin Library refurbishment was an excellent demonstration where we could keep some of the original building that the public has some affection for. In your opinion, you don't think that we could use this same approach with the Kew Library?
I guess to come back to the vision and design brief and the outcomes that it was seeking, particularly to take advantage of the open space areas on both sides of the building, the creation of a new building that manages the levels across the site and integrates well, achieves that outcome better. The vision and design brief through that process did reconsider an extensive refurbishment of the existing building, but nonetheless concluded that a new building was the preferred approach.
Councillor Nolan.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Thanks for the report from the officers. Would you care to comment, please, on the area of the new building that was proposed in comparison to the existing building that is there at the moment, and just, you know, in a very general way, in square metres and in general design? Thank you.
Yep, so I'll just talk in general square metres, not to the last, square centimetre. But the current building is about 2,000 square metres. The proposed knockdown rebuild was about 300 metres less than that, but just because of cost in terms of what we could build for the amount allocated in the long-term financial strategy. However, what you get in terms of lost floor area, you gain in flexibility, capacity to move spaces around. You look at a lot of contemporary library design, they're very flexibly designed. You can move, reconfigure activities, furniture, etc. So we're going to gain with the flexibility, even though it was a smaller footprint. And the outdoor deck area, we were really hoping to be able to program that very heavily, so we'd get actually kind of an increase in yield through that outdoor deck in terms of an outdoor programming space.
Thank you.
Councillor Gold.
Thank you very much. If I can just pick up on that point. You did say that that area was allowed because of constraints in budget. If we look forward a little way, a number of decades, within the life of that building, what do the projections say we need for a footprint area for a library of this type in this area?
So by 2041, so we use ALIA, which is sort of a library national benchmark in terms of sort of standards and guidelines for how much library space you need per head of population. And by 2041, we're going to need about 2,500 square metres. So, they're always they're quite a generous guideline, but even so, and you can be very adaptive. Very few municipal libraries in Australia meet those guidelines, but they're kind of, for a really good practice, that's what you want. So we'll be at about 2,500 square metres. That's in terms of the population by 2041.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, and through you, as a follow-up to that, 2,500 square metres in Kew alone or across the city?
In Kew. So it's currently the current footprint's about 1,900 and something, just under.
Any further questions? Councillor Nolan, would you like to put your motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I would like to move a motion. Mr. Wee, would you mind assisting?
Sorry.
I seek some clarity, please? I thought I foreshadowed a motion first.
A motion foreshadowed has no procedural standing. I'll come to you if Councillor Nolan's motion fails.
Right, okay, sure.
Thank you. Through your chair, I'd like to move the motion up on the screen be accepted.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Galt.
Happy to second.
Are there any objections? Councillor Sinfield? Or is anyone opposed, I should say? Councillor Nolan, as the mover, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I do, thank you. Thank you, through your chair. Look, the Kew Library currently serves our community, including our residents and students from Kew and East Kew and beyond. And in talking to residents personally, 70% of people have been very surprised at the decision, and I'm talking recently in the last 6 months, to demolish and to rebuild. And they often then ask why, what's wrong with it? As a new council, we've been able to bring strong community input to alternatives. So the prospect to demolish and rebuild something of slightly smaller size than what is there today for $22 million, taking 18 months to 2 years, taking that library out of offline, albeit with some intermediate sort of means to try and offset some of the inconvenience. And so as a council and as a councillor, I've tried to grapple with what responsible spending looks like and what are the competing priorities. And we're right now building the 2025-26 budget. And we have taken on board comments from Kew and East Kew in particular that love existing library, but also we have taken into account a big list from new councillors as well as re-elected incumbent councillors looking forward into the 2025-26 budget. So this is very much with one eye to the future and with one eye looking at the Kew Library. There's been a number of tours. I've been through 2 tours, official tours and some other unofficial tours. We've looked at the existing issues right at our front of mind. The roof needs replacing, it does leak. The sewer needs replacing, it does block. It's not a big deal to replace the sewer. The aircon needs replacement. We need to do some electrical upgrades when that was done. And people were familiar with this in their personal lives, in their house on this type of approach. So we've built up a picture of what is needed right now to address the key safety, critical maintenance issues, and that would be a stage 1. Stage 2 would be significant but low spend issues that go to Officer McCackey's, some of the things that she mentioned earlier, carpets, making new shelves mobile, making the lighting able to be suspended from the ceiling so that you can move the mobile racking around, large fans so we get better comfort for users, and we think a fraction of the cost of the 22 million. And following that, we would be putting forward a stage 2, which would be a master plan to look at the innovation and flexibility to expand and look out at Alexandra Gardens, if that was the plan, to make a space to create the breakout rooms. Again, people living in this community are familiar with that type of approach in their own homes. So in the context of the whole Burundara and not depriving people unnecessarily for two years, and balancing a big capital spend and a budget that has to foresee community spaces around Burundara, shopping centre upgrades, climate actions, traffic safety, the list goes on. There's a lot of competing objectives. So I could go on with the list, but it is a very big list. Trust me, as we look at the budget ahead. So I commend the staged approach that I've outlined. To address, I would suggest many, if not all of the issues that we've been talking about tonight, we've heard from the officers, that keeps our library open and improves it in a budgetary responsible and I would say in a very prudent approach. So I commend the motion to fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Councillor Gold is the seconder. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I would reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm uncomfortable in moving something where I don't know what the approximate cost is going to be. So in the interest of transparency and accountability, Councillor Nolan, would you like to add to your motion the approximate cost if or do we have to of the project so that we know what we're voting for? It's the community's money after all.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I may, the proposition you have in front of you is to actually refer this to Council's budget process, during which you will have the detail of the costs which are contemplated. The other point I would make is that I don't believe it would be appropriate to publish the costs in a public report on the basis that Council will ultimately be seeking tenders for this work, and you will have foreshadowed what you believe the cost of the works might be, and that would actually compromise Council's negotiating position. So I think the most appropriate way to look at what's being proposed is that this becomes part of your budget process where you will actually have the costs in front of you and you are able to then make a determination as to whether you are willing to allocate the required resources.
Councillor Pattis.
Madam Mayor, so I don't understand. We've got 4 options here in the report. Is that because the 4 options where we do have cost estimates have gone out and have been made publicly available? I don't understand why the confidentiality with this new cost, whereas we've already got 4 options where we have publicised those costs. I'm just trying to understand, and I totally support commercial confidentiality. We don't want to compromise that, but I'm not quite understanding why we can't give an approximate, since we've already given approximate estimates.
The cost estimates we have are prepared by quantity surveyors. They've not been put out in the open marketplace for assessment at this stage. So the relationship we have with quantity surveyors will be one of privacy, where Council's request of them is respected accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I can't bring myself to support the motion that is on the screen tonight, and as you may have guessed, I was going to move the officer's recommendation, in fact foreshadowed to do so, to honour our contractual commitment. However, in an unprecedented move, I note that you've turned a blind eye to that because it wasn't appealing. My first observation is that we as a council are being distracted from the strategic question that Ms McCaughey raised earlier, and that being, what is the service that we are trying to deliver here? And what is the quality of that service we wish to deliver? The secondary question is, what does the building need to look like in order to deliver that service? I believe our community, our children of today, our leaders of tomorrow should have access to an inspiring space, a modern library where the Alexandra Gardens are integrated, maximising the unique opportunity that we have here in the heart of Kew, as is well articulated in the vision and design brief that was endorsed by the previous council. In March 2024, I think it was said earlier, and to further honour the contract that we entered into. Dishonouring that contract affects our reputation as individuals, it affects our reputation as a council, and it risks other organisations, other businesses, other suppliers and contractors not wishing to enter into contracts with us in the future. It tarnishes our reputation and draws unnecessary attention to us that we won't maintain our word or our written contract. As far as timing is concerned, to my knowledge, this project has been running since 2017, Our community deserves this facility, and it's simply not fair. The report, I note, actually says that it's been going for 14 years since the master planning for Kew in 2009. Our community deserves a great new library. Our community does not deserve a multi-million-dollar band-aid on a 60-year-old town hall. We've heard tonight that the building fails to meet standards and it fails to deliver what is needed. And by 2041, we'll need 2,500 square metres of library space in Kew. So what you're saying by voting against this motion is that our community deserves better. If you support the motion that is on the screen tonight, you're telling the people of Kew that they don't deserve a new library, that those children don't deserve a new space. I'd like to acknowledge the correspondence received from past Mayor Judith Vos in her capacity as the President of the Historical Society and their contribution on this journey. I'd also like to acknowledge the hard work of officers over so many years, 10 years that I've been aware of, and their contribution to bringing this to us tonight. And I also acknowledge the efforts of the previous councillor for Studley Ward, where the Kew Library was situated until the boundary redraw last election. I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be honest, I am still unresolved with where I'm going to cast my vote this evening. My biggest concern is that the current building, I believe, is structurally sound and could be adapted. I understand what Councillor Galt spoke about, how it could be re-envisaged, but also hearing a director, Ms McCackey, say that the main issues with the current library are predominantly just shelving, internal layout. When you do have a large shell, you can reconfigure it, you can put new shelving in, you can put new lighting in. So that alone for me isn't convincing enough or compelling enough to say that we need to demolish it and rebuild. But then I'm also torn because I do know that often to repurpose an older building can be incredibly expensive, and it's what's unknown that can create additional cost. But my biggest concern of all is that neither outcome's going to deliver what we need. And I'm really worried that we could be investing multi-million dollars, as Councillor Sinfield said, on a band-aid that ultimately might lead in 5 or 10 years' time to then needing to demolish the building and start from scratch. I am really interested to hear what the rest of my councillor colleagues have to say, because I'm really torn on this one. But I do know that this conversation's been going since I was first elected in late 2016. We debated it in 17 and every year since. And I just don't see either option particularly attractive. So I know I'm going to have to decide, I just don't know where.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Abuki.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'm also quite torn about the Kew Library. I mean, if we use the logic that demolishing and rebuilding someone gives us something that's, you know, that gives us a lot more functionality, we should demolish and rebuild all the houses that we have. You know, there is something to be said about buildings that have public affection and sentiment. But I do understand that a new building will give bespoke, wonderful, vibrant spaces. I do understand that with interface with the library around it. I mean, that's what a new build gives you. But I'm also very torn that, honestly, I have received feedback from many people who appreciate the library as it is, who see it as a structure with historical suburban significance and would like us to work with it as a structurally sound main hall and create something different. I do understand that there is not going to be any cost saving if we do a refurbish and renovation compared to a demolish and rebuild. But I also think in terms of what we are trying to encourage our residents to do, and that's to be mindful of how they live, the materials that they use, the emissions that occur when you demolish and rebuild, living lightly on the earth. So like Councillor Hollingsworth, I find this a very difficult decision. I'm going to have to make a decision as well. But in terms of sentiment, I have been contacted by many residents who hold that building in regard and don't want to see it go.
Thank you, Councillor Bookie. Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some observations, if I may, to assist fellow councillors in this decision. I've spent 30 years in my career in development and refurbishment, and in my past I've built new buildings and also spent considerable time refurbishing historic buildings. So I'd like to think I have a reasonable appreciation of the challenges both in a new build and also restoring or refurbishing existing buildings, which, to your point, Councillor Hollingsworth, is never easy, has often many traps and has budget challenges that are very difficult to identify at the outset. So it's a challenging question we have before us, but having listened to the detailed officers' reports, and I thank you and your teams very much for many years of effort in putting together what could be a tremendous building in a new build. The points you raised about, Ms McCaughey, about an improved customer experience, welcoming spaces, a comfortable building that's warm and cool, furniture and shelving that's flexible, a Wi-Fi and a modernised electronic system, and an engaging environment, all of which are admirable objectives. I'm not convinced that a refurbished building can't deliver on those very important objectives. I believe all of those could potentially be achieved through the refurbishment of this building. I'm also reflecting on the ward councillor and those close to this area who have received considerable local feedback about the history and the affection for this building. And finally, having inspected it several times, and I think having listened to and read the reports, listened to the officers and read the reports, that the building itself is structurally sound. So we have a good envelope, I believe, within which to work. So challenging for me to always not support a new build. That's sort of in my blood, but I'm respecting very much the input of those that are very close to this project, and I'll be voting to support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Colt, are you still reserving a right? Still got a couple more councillors who'd like to speak. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. Like Councillors Hollingsworth and Ibuki, it's a difficult decision to make, and we need to weigh up a lot of issues. Councillor Sinfield raised concern about breaking a contract, etc., and what that means. I think if we're going to go down this path, we need to do it now, and I think we are in time to take a revised approach. So whilst that would be an issue if we're further down the track, we're not so far down the track that we can't rethink, and I think it's fundamentally important for a newly elected council to review a project which is at its outset of this scale. So I actually think we'd be remiss if we weren't having this conversation. That would concern me more. So I'm very pleased we're having this conversation. I also heard what my colleague sitting next to me, Councillor Osborne-Smith, has said and the views he's expressed, and I'm very swayed by that. So on balance, and I've also received representations, but I also take into account the councillors who are closest to the area and their views and their understanding of the local community. So I think it's really important to take that into account as well. So on balance, I will be supporting the motion that Councillor Nolan has moved and that Councillor Gold has seconded. And I think it sets up a prudent approach financially and responsibly, and allows us the opportunity to look forward. It's got quite, I mean, looking at the motion, I can see it still allows us to look forward to a longer term outcome. It's not just a short term band-aid, and that's not what I'm reading there. And I look forward to hearing from my colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too will be supporting the motion. I find it really hard. I struggle to spend 22 million to 22 million or 20 million to knock down a building which is perfectly sound, rather than refurbishing it. We've got so many other priorities in the city. I think libraries are really important, but to spend 20 million, we're going to have to find that 20 million somewhere else. So I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Friend-Pereira.
Thank you, Mayor. We've heard reference tonight about, a building being 60 years old. I believe the building we're currently in is over 100 years old. So the structural integrity of a building has to be taken into account, and how you can adapt that over time. This building has gone through many changes, and I think Kew Library can also do that. I also think, from what I've experienced of the tour of Kew Library and to speaking to people, that they want to see that structurally sound element of the library, and especially the stained glass windows and other elements, retained. I also think this is prudent in that it stages out an approach, and I note that what we're actually saying tonight is to cease the contract for the architectural services associated with the demolition, and then to refer to the budget process for stage 1 and 2. And I think also we need to look at that flexibility. That's the key elements. We know that we need another 300 square meters in the current structure to just bring us up to the sector standards. And we heard from the director tonight about how much we'll need in the future. And I think we need to be open to making those adaptations at the given point in time. So I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Galt, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would indeed. Thank you, ma'am. I'd also like to thank the officers who've been along a very long train with this one, and the ups and downs have been quite traumatic, and also in helping this largely new council wrestle with this as well and providing us with the information we sought. I thank you. I also know that there was a process of public consultation early in the day about this, but I can't ignore the feedback from quite a number of my colleagues that are saying they heard from people they spoke to when they knocked on doors saying, golly, we didn't realise the proposal was to knock this down. We don't support this. I do agree that much of the building is past its useful life, but also much of the building is reusable. For instance, the main central hall that everyone has stressed they want to keep is a great shell to work with. The thing that swayed me greatly also was, which I mentioned in question time, was the existing building is too small. The proposed new building is even smaller, with no real plans for going forward. And I think we can fix that. And I had noted down here the wonderful money we can save, but I've been told I can't say it until budget time. But I believe what we've been looking at in recent days says we can address all the very serious problems that have been listed by the officers tonight and other people to do with the floor, the flexibility, the furniture, the air conditioning, the plumbing, the wiring, etc., for a very reasonable price. And more importantly, we're planning to do a master plan for the overall building that will guide us through that process and make sure this is not a band-aid. We do not waste any of this money. It will be spent knowing what we're planning to do next, so it is not wasted in any way, shape or form. It's a staged proposal, fixing up what we need to fix up now, and in time to come, potentially adding an extension to this building that provides that other 500 or 600 square metres of the building and gives us the building that the people of Kew deserve in 2041 as well as now. So I encourage my colleagues tonight to support this amended motion on the screen before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Thank you, councillors. Now I'll go back to Councillor Nolan as the mover to close the debate.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Look, I'll be brief. Just to recap, I do want to thank the officers very sincerely and the staff, number of library staff here this evening for, putting up through this whole process. We've spoken about the feedback from many residents. Kew East does go to Kew for their library. It's very real. There is a sense of place and there is a sentiment which is intergenerational. Was the Kew Town Hall? There's people that have gone to wedding receptions, etc. there. Replacing a 2,000 square metre building with a lot of that sentiment and sense of place with something smaller doesn't sit right. I think to the dishonouring the contract issue that was raised, we have, it's obviously commercial in confidence, but we have explored what the break contract would be. It's not that significant, and breaking these contracts is not that unusual. It's not something you want to make a habit of, but it's not unusual. So, repurposing the older building in terms of the children and the users and the students, I'm one myself. We're balancing that against everything else we can do with what the money that is left. That's parks, that's toilets, that's supporting traders, that's residents, that's fixing some traffic issues. So I think it is a prudent approach, and I thank the councillors for their support.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the motion carried.
I call a division.
All those in favour? Councillor Baillieu, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Abuki, Councillor Galt, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Franco, Councillor Osborne-Smith, Councillor Friend-Pereira, Councillor Pattis, Councillor Tawney. All those against? Councillor Sinfield. The motion's carried. We now move to item 7.7 on the agenda, Kew Recreation Centre Heat Pump Technology. This item will be introduced by Daniel Freer, Places and Spaces, and Anthea Kyprios, Manager of Capital Projects.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. In response to the notice of motion from 9th of December 2024, Council meeting, officers present to councillors a report regarding the feasibility of replacing the gas heating at the Kew Recreation Centre with heat pump technology. Following the notice of motion, the contractor paused purchasing of the gas boilers pending an outcome of this report. The use of electric heat pumps in aquatic centres is considered best practice as it avoids fossil fuel use and associated greenhouse emissions. By installing heat pumps at Kew Recreation Centre, approximately 860 tonnes of emissions will be saved. The estimated cost of proceeding with the heat pumps is in the order of $5.9 million, including the design, installation and associated works and power supply upgrade required at the site. When considering swapping the heating source at Kew Recreation Centre from gas to electric, there are many factors that should be considered. Council appointed a services consultant to identify the impacts of swapping to an electric system and had a further consultant review the feasibility of gas versus electric as the energy source, and have concluded that there is no payback on heat pumps due to the high upfront cost of the plant. Through a net present value calculation, the heat pump solution is assessed to be $1.4 million and $3.5 million more expensive over a 25-year period than gas boilers. Both consultants have used their own judgment on costs and input, including costing of carbon offsets and interest. Hence, there is a difference between the two NPVs. The consultants have used the Australian Energy Market Operator Value of 2% inflation on both gas and electricity prices in their models. We appreciate that predicting the increase of either energy source is challenging, and there are varying views as to the expected increase. We can consider some sensitivity of the pricing increases in reviewing the models. Specifically, we have considered the point that the heat pumps have a payback period over the 25 years, which require the gas prices to increase around 7.5% per annum, with electricity prices increasing at 2%. If Council was to invest the $5.9 million from the heat pump project cost elsewhere, at the current potential return rate of 4.64% over 10 years, the potential interest would be around $2.7 million. An escalation in gas prices requiring a differential of some 47% annually would be required to achieve this return in the same time period. A review of financial data is just one way to review the viability of proceeding with heat pump technology, and it should not be the only consideration. As mentioned, this site will produce 860 tonnes of emissions with the gas boilers. It is hard to put a price on the impact for our environment. If we were to consider ways to quantify the environmental cost, one way is through carbon offsets, which over 25 years would cost Council $665,000, or through shadow pricing, which is priced at $70 a tonne, equating to $1.5 million over the 25 years. Council operates 3 other aquatic centres, and we have reviewed the likely cost to change 2 of those centres to heat pump technology. The estimated cost to change Burundara Sports Centre and Ashburton Pool and Aquatic Centre is around $3.7 million each. We have previously discussed the cost for these centres to be around $2 to $2.5 million. However, over the past week, officers have continued to review the project information, and those figures did not sufficiently take into account the cost to purchase and install the heat pumps and associated equipment and power supply upgrades. To proceed with the heat pumps at Kew Recreation Centre, it is recommended to finalise the detailed design and provide this to the contractor for a fixed variation. The contract with the builder allows for Council to direct a variation with mechanisms within the contract to resolve the price while achieving a fair price. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Galt.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I'd like to start by foreshadowing a motion when the time is right, but I have 2 questions I will ask now. Officers, thank you very much for that and for the report you've done and all the details you've provided us. I think you touched on the topic of differential escalation in prices of gas and electricity. So just confirming that if electricity was to stay where it is or fall and gas was to continue to, rise, there is a point at which the whole feasibility would flip around the other way and it would go a long way towards paying it. Just a quick yes or no, and we probably need some more detail around that later.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And you have, thank you very much, reviewed the price of doing up Burundara and other centres. It is fair to say, I believe, that the reason that they are lower is because they're easier to convert. The scope of doing that work is quite different. But that the price...
What's the question, Councillor Gold?
I just asked to confirm that there is a major different scope. Could you explain that difference, please?
yes, there is a difference in scope. About 30% of the project cost for Kew Recreation Centre is because of the need for the heating and cooling system to also be converted to all electric, which isn't required at the other sites.
Okay. And just finally, can I then ask that, do you believe, in what you know today, it might be an unfair question, that if we ever are to convert across from gas-fired boilers to a heat pump, this will be the cheapest time to do it?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, our understanding of work into the future would be at a more expensive cost than what it is now.
Thank you.
Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I've got three questions, but I think they're really quick. The first one, having not been part of the previous council, I just want to find out what was the reason why heat pumps weren't considered in the original design for this? Because that would have saved us a whole heap of grief.
Through Madam Mayor, at the time of the original concept and early design work for the Kew Recreation Centre would have been in around 2017, 2018. Heat pump technology, as it was to apply for leisure centres, was in very early stages and nowhere near as advanced or tested as it is today, and was discounted.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Second question, if we were to move and accept the recommendation that's there, we're effectively locking ourselves into a 5.9 million approximate cost of doing the conversion. I just want to clarify that by moving this motion, we're going down a path of having to spend upfront $5.9 million that is unbudgeted for this project.
Through Madam Mayor, what this recommendation is saying, in order to get a very accurate price for the work, $240,000 is required immediately to undertake a detailed design. At that point, a variation to the contract, which would be the subject of a future council resolution for the capital cost of installation, would be required. So this resolution does not bind council to a $5.9 million solution.
Okay. Third question, which is more of a clarification, because I may not have understood what's been written. If page 301 of the report, it says planting 39,500 trees would offset the equivalent carbon emissions from the Kew Recreation Centre. Now, I assume that's saying that if the Kew Recreation Centre is using gas boilers, you would need to plant 39,500 trees for the life of this centre to offset the equivalent carbon emissions. Is that what it's saying? Do I understand that correctly?
Through Madam Mayor, I might just clarify with Mr Hampton, who's with us this evening. Is the 39,500 trees per year or over a period?
Through you, Madam Chair, it is over the 25-year life of this exercise that would need to plant 40,000 trees.
One off, right? Not every year.
Yes.
Okay. So,
we're looking to plant and maintain a forest of trees, of 40,000 trees for the life of the heat pumps of the gas boilers.
Gas boilers, okay, thank you. So my second question is, therefore, I'm assuming the Kew Rec Centre with heat pumps will still have emissions much lower. So how many trees would we need to offset the equivalent carbon emissions from the Kew Rec Centre if we had heat pumps?
Through you, Madam Chair, in the report there are two models that are provided on table 1. The first is if there is electric heat pumps with electric supplementary boiler heating, there is no emissions from at that point, and that is on the basis that council buys its electricity from a green provider. Where there is gas supplementary heating required, there is 4 tonnes per annum that would be emitted.
So it's considerably less.
Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. Could officers comment on why the report looks primarily at the financial implications of going down this path, but it doesn't really address the alternative costs involved in offsetting the emissions involved, other than, say, the reference to the 40,000 trees, which is not a realistic option. Because, and I say that because if we're solely to look at the financial costs, council would still be up for quite significant costs in addressing the offsets. And whilst there are some other references there, it's not largely the focus. It's looking purely on the financial view. And secondly, in relation to that, did the previous council look at how this level of emissions would be addressed and what measures were proposed to be put in place, or was that simply not a consideration?
Mayor, I might answer part of the question, and Mr. Freya may have something else to add. I think to deal with the last part of your question first, the view at the time was very much based around the fact that heat pump technology was not particularly well developed and not shown to be all that reliable in these circumstances. So the council of the day didn't need to turn its mind so much to what that might involve, what the implications might be for that reason. So it may well have been that other considerations would have applied had heat pump technology been much more advanced than it was at that point. The other point, I guess, to make is that when we're bringing a report to you, we really have an obligation to actually assess what the financial implications are, because clearly we're spending other people's money, and that needs to be something which is done very wisely. So what we've endeavoured to do in this report is to give you a number of different lenses through which to view this from a financial perspective. Because unfortunately, what we don't have is sufficient certainty about all of the variables which play into that financial analysis to be able to give you absolute confidence that on a financial basis, decision X or decision Y is the right one. So ultimately, we're providing you with different options and choices as to how you might look at this from a financial perspective, but we acknowledge that there is more to this issue than financial considerations. And this is really where, as a level of government, you're going to turn your mind to what you think is the best outcome for the community, having regard to those considerations. And in this case, you'll be thinking very seriously about climate change and carbon emissions reductions. So we understand that. This report clearly recognises that to be the case, because some of the lenses you've been offered relate to exactly those considerations.
Councillor Nolan.
Yeah, look, just a brief question. Thank you to the officers for their report. I just want to confirm, please, if you would, the 5.9 million cost of conversion, and I've got a number written down here, which was the gas price escalation, which would be required to make the gas and electric option. Did I hear 7.2%? Is that correct?
7.5%.
7.5, thank you. And so that's the price that takes in, just confirming that's the price that takes into account the higher capital cost of the electric and the lower running cost of the electric versus the lower cost to install the gas, but then a higher price to run it for the 25 years. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question, Ms Kipriots or Mr Freya, with regard to an email I sent on the 17th of Feb, it was just a question with regard to Victorian energy upgrades for businesses. that talked about a 74,000 per year saving for conversion into electric facilities. I'm just wondering if you've had an opportunity to determine if in this situation, council, if they supported to proceed with the electric heat pumps, would be eligible for the 74,000 annually by investing in an upgrade through the VEU program. Is that something you've had an opportunity to research yet?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we have. This project unfortunately doesn't meet the criteria. We have made in the past attempts to seek funding at a federal level for the conversion to heat pump technology. At this point in time, we've not made an application for this particular project to the federal government, but that would be the more relevant funding program.
So if I may, just to follow up, if it was the will of council to support the heat pump installation, could you still apply for future grants?
We would need to look at the criteria for the funding and to determine whether or not how the contribution of council's budget effectively to the project is, and whether or not any offset funding could be used or not.
And sorry, just a final question on that. Obviously with the federal elections imminent, are you aware that this might be a particular issue that might produce grant opportunity or grant application opportunities?
Through Madam Mayor, I understand the grant application process is not open at this point for the next round of the project, but it is a project that council could advocate for outside of the grant application process.
Thank you.
Councillor Abuki.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I note in the report that it states that the use of heat pumps in aquatic centres is now considered best practice. Could you please provide the basis of that statement? And also, would you be able to advise, if you know, whether recently built or aquatic centres being built now are using gas boilers or heat pumps?
The most recent examples we could cite for you would be the recent Carnegie Swim Centre, which has been built with heat pump technology. The Northcote Aquatic Centre, I think opened about 2 years ago perhaps now, also has heat pump technology. And the Brimbank Aquatic Centre also has heat pump technology with gas supplementary heating operating from that side. It would appear that when you look at tenders at the moment for construction of new facilities, heat pump technology is what is being provided. Where there is retrofitting of existing gas boilers to heat pump technology, there is often the gas boilers is left in place to provide redundant backup heating for those existing facilities.
Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 questions, if I may. The first, I'd like to just focus for a moment on the design cost estimates of nearly $250,000, and I'm wondering if the officers would care to comment a little on the basis for that. It seems anecdotally high to me. And I guess, secondly, is it likely that that design cost may be absorbed, at least in part, in a design and build contract, which may be awarded in time to the company to deliver these heat pumps, if in fact they go ahead?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. The design cost includes both the cost to the consultant and their sub-consultants team. It is a multidisciplinary approach to designing the heat pumps, as we do need to consider the structural engineering as well as the acoustics and a few other parts. So it's quite a complex design process. And there are also fees involved with liaising with the power authorities, as we will need a substantial power upgrade to the site, so that needs to be commenced at the same time.
Thank you. One more question, if I may. I'd like to ask you about the gas backup situation. I think the figure was some 200 hours a year where the ambient temperature might drop to very low outside, in which case, as I understand, gas backup may be required. Have I got that right, or is this system a fully independent heat pump system that avoids the use of gas backup at all?
Through you, Mayor, we're suggesting a electric backup system as well and completely eliminating the gas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Sinfield. Oh, sorry, one officer.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We've looked at both options, a gas supplementary heating or electric boiler for the supplementary heating. Our preference is to go all electric, but if there's any problems in getting power supply or the cost of upgrading the power supply to go all electric is prohibitive, we may come back with an alternative solution which uses gas just for the supplementary heating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. Through you to the CEO, please. In light of an email received addressed to all councillors, the CEO and the Director, this afternoon at 4:51 p.m. from Mr Neil Harding, the Managing Director of ADCO, is the CEO recommending that we proceed with this matter as it's on the table this evening, or are we better to defer this paper to a future meeting?
Madam Mayor, I don't believe the correspondence should have any bearing on this particular item. What's being dealt with in that correspondence relates to other matters.
And a further question in the same vein, in light of matters proceeding through the Melbourne Magistrates Court today, is any further information known that would prohibit or prevent or discourage us from making a decision on this matter tonight?
No.
Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to officers, how would proceeding with the gas option either help or hinder us achieving a 100% actual emissions reduction by 2040, which is what our intent is in our climate action plan?
Through Madam Mayor, there is no doubt it would not help achieve that outcome.
Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask an additional question. Can councillors advise whether the feasibility and cost of installing heat pumps was looked at by the previous council and when? And in that vein, can council officers confirm whether the price has increased significantly since that time, and can those details be released?
You coming to me?
Through Madam Mayor, the release of that material would be subject to a council resolution. They were provided to council previously on a confidential basis and not circulated to the community.
Any further questions? Councillor Galt.
Ready for a motion?
We're ready for a motion.
Wonderful. I'm going to propose an amendment to the motion currently on the screen. If you'd be so kind as to put it up. Thank you very much.
Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Nolan.
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to second the motion as presented.
To assist the mover, is there anyone opposed? Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Galt, as the mover, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I most certainly do. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Chair, can I ask a question? as to whether Councillor Galt would be willing to incorporate a motion to release an additional clause to release those past figures, subject to review of any confidentiality.
Seek guidance on that, whether that's something you're happy to do, or is there any barrier to doing that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, what I would suggest is that we need to review those papers to ensure there is nothing which would compromise any commercial in confidence positions council may have. So if such a motion were to be moved, it would be on the basis that it is subject to that review. On the basis that is done, I see no difficulty with those reports being released.
Councillor Galt, are you happy?
I don't have a problem with that, if that's what's required.
Can we second a motion to adjourn? A motion to adjourn for 5 minutes. Do I have a mover?
I'm happy to move that motion.
Anyone seconded? Seconded, Victor Franco, Councillor Franco. Anyone opposed? All those in favour? Declare the motion carried. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you. Opened. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Look, on reflection and consideration, I'll withdraw my request to Councillor Galt to add that additional amendment. I'm happy with the motion as is and happy to discuss this issue separately.
Councillor Galt.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. I'm very happy to stick with the original motion as is currently displayed on the screen.
Would you like to talk to it?
I'd like to move an amendment.
I think if you're happy to assume that my seconder is happy with it also, he did second that before. Yep, happy to speak to it now.
I'd like to move an amendment. I'm not sure if my microphone's working.
It is.
Great, thank you. At clause 2, I would like inserted the approximate value of that detailed design work.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Pattis. Is anyone opposed? I will put it on the screen.
Can I seek a point of clarification? Would including a value in the motion not inhibit our ability to negotiate?
It's our cost.
It's already in the report.
I'm just seeking clarification, Councillor.
Is Councillor Sinfield?
Happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor Pattis, are you happy with that?
The officer's recommendation.
Is it opposed? All those in favour? That's the amendment. Now we'll return to debate on the motion. On the amendment. Councillor Sinfield to speak.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief, knowing that we have meetings following this one, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. We are a council that believes in transparency, good governance and openness to our community, so I don't see any reason why anyone wouldn't support what is contained in the report to be contained in the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Pattis, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
Reserve my right.
Councillor Nolan.
Yeah, look, I think the $5.9 million and a 6 weeks delay, we heard the other night, and sorry? Only speaking the amendment? Oh, sorry, I'm not going to...
No, it's the motion. We're speaking on the motion. The amendment's been passed.
Yeah, okay. So we heard it'd be a 40 to 60% cost increase in CapEx if it was done later, at a later date. So if we went ahead and put in gas now and came back later, it would be 40 to 60% uplift. That's even without inflation. Gas prices are going up. This is going to be a 50 to 70 year asset. And And so it's responsible now to take this decision now because it seems reasonably line ball across 25 years, gas versus electric. We sit here at year zero. If we were to pollute with gas exhaust and CO2 for another 10 years and then turn around and say, we've got to go and do a heat pump, then that would be 4 to 5 months out of action, I'd expect, whereas today it's just 6 weeks. It's a 25-metre pool. I think Boroondara needs to, and our community expects Boroondara to show leadership and at least follow best practice. We've heard Northcote, Brimbank, Carnegie, I think also Norlane are all going all electric. And it's never going to be cheaper. Now is the time, and if it's not now, then when? Thank you.
Okay, councillors, as the motion wasn't opposed, it is generally the mover and the seconder who speak. I will allow if somebody would like to speak. If not, I'll move to Councillor Pattis. Councillor Friend-Pereira?
Yeah, very briefly. I'm going to be supporting this because of the alignment with the Climate Action Plan. In 2021, this council passed a climate emergency declaration. It then implemented a climate action plan. One of the points in that is 100% actual emissions reduction by 2040. We've heard from officers that going with gas will not assist us to achieve that. The key word in all of this is action. Action comes at a cost. When that cost gets realised has been a question for our predecessors and is now a question for us, and I don't intend to be found wanting.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Just briefly, if I may, I wrestled with this expensive decision over recent weeks, but on reflection and in consultation with fellow councillors, I've considered the net additional cost to the changes. I've considered potential savings in electricity versus the less predictable gas market. I've considered the impact on our contractual relations, and I've considered the delay of 6 weeks. Leaving aside the financials, I've considered really the future and our obligation of this council, I believe, to respond to and also lead community attitude. We consider ourselves a bold council and one of action, and that means looking not just to the near future, but the long-term future as well. It's a future our kids will inherit, and I'm proud to be able to support this amendment and proceed with the heat pump works. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galt.
Thank you very much. I'll abbreviate what I was going to say. I was delighted to see a proposal that came forward to say this proposal fits within the existing building, can be acoustically treated. There appeared to be no penalty pricing and only 6 weeks prolongation of the program. It was an amazing outcome. The price appears to be fair. It was looked at by an international quantity surveyor that understands these things in Australia and overseas. And the contractor also looked at it and gave us an indication of price. I think we've got an indication it's a very fair price. We've heard tonight it's industry best practice, and I've heard of many examples where this has been built around Melbourne successfully. It will never be cheaper than now. And I'll stick my neck out to say there's possibility, a very high possibility, that we will make savings on the operational costs. So this brings us into line with a climate emergency, our climate action plan, and the Victorian government initiatives in this direction. I recommend it to my fellows tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. Like my colleagues have said, this is about leadership. It's about long-term thinking. It's about looking to the future. We have the opportunity before us to actually put in place something that will address emissions going forward. There is no plan to address the emissions from a gas-fired solution, and I actually think it was a failure of the past councillors to not go down the path that we're looking at addressing now. Yes, there is some cost, but there is a cost to leadership, and the net cost of that is something that I've also looked at. I think some of the assumptions about gas prices rising at 2% are completely unrealistic, and there's a very clear difference between electricity prices and gas prices in terms of their volatility, in terms of their long-term reliance on factors outside of domestic politics and domestic control and geopolitical factors that go into gas pricing. That and I think Councillor Galt is right when he says it'll probably pay for itself. I don't see continuing down the path of what we have already as being a viable, or even it is irresponsible to not address the issue. In my view, we have as well, and the past council passed resolutions in relation to taking into consideration climate factors, and yet we haven't really addressed it. It was just, to pass those resolutions and then to effectively ignore them is not viable. We need to address it. We're fortunate that we're in a position that we can address it, and I'm pleased to see that we are, and I actually think it'll work out financially more responsible if we address this now.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Pattis, as the seconder, do you know? Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. So for the record, I will oppose the motion that is on the table, albeit that I did move the amendment to that, and that was based on transparency. The last thing I would do with public money midway through a project that is subject to significant complexities and litigation is a significant contractual variation. I don't believe that replacing the specified gas boilers with electric heat pumps is prudent, and therefore I don't believe that this motion is prudent. The cost is not insignificant. $6 million added to the project cost is huge, and the report acknowledges that the economic and emissions factors haven't significantly changed since the previous evaluation was done. Spending an extra $6 million on this project equates to $80 per household of the 75,000 rateable residential properties in the city. Among other items, a payment of $45,000 was made to AGL in 2021-22 under an agreement for a new gas supply to the site, and that, among other costs, will be lost. It's up to each of us as a value judgment. I accept that. We each place value on different things in life, and I simply don't share your ideology. That's because it's largely unquantifiable in a quantitative, measurable, economic way, and that's how my brain's programmed. For me, the cost of living crisis, I want to keep rates down. And frankly, I'd prefer to plant more trees.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Councillors, I'd like to put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the amendment carried. We'll now vote on the motion. All those in favour of the motion?
I thought we had already passed the amendment.
All those against? I declare the motion carried.
I call a division.
Councillors, all those in favour? Councillor Baillieu, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Abuki, Councillor Galt, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Franco, Councillor Osborne-Smith, Councillor Friend-Pereira, Councillor Pattis, Councillor Tawney. All those against? Councillor Sinfield. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, councillors. We move on to item 8, general business. Councillors, are there any items of general business? We have one item, 8.1, leave of absence for Councillor Baillieu. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion for a mover for the following motion as appearing on the screen behind me.
You should leave the chamber.
Councillor Baillieu.
I believe I technically have to leave the chamber.
I missed that one. Who is that? Councillor Baillieu has declared a conflict of interest and he has to leave the meeting, Councillor Baillieu. There's a motion on the screen. Councillors, do I have a mover of this motion? Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to move it.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Abuki.
Happy to second.
Is any councillor opposed? I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Councillors, are there any other items of general business? Councillor Abuki.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge several individuals and their team for their contributions and work over the past month. Firstly, thank you to Ms Sue Chan, Manager Arts, Culture and Economic Development, and her team for their exceptional work in delivering the Summer in the Park series. Their dedication and quick thinking in some challenging weather conditions ensured that our community enjoyed a fantastic lineup of events that brought people together and celebrated the arts and parks of Boroondara. We councillors sincerely appreciate your efforts in making this series such a success. I also want to commend Mr Scott Walker, Director Urban Living, and his team for their highly professional and well-organised community forum on the state housing reforms. Their careful planning and facilitation ensured a constructive discussion, allowing residents to engage and voice some of their concerns with the proposed changes. Additionally, I'd like to recognise the Mayor, Councillor Turney, as well as Councillors Galt, Baillieu and Franco for their leadership in engaging with the state government so that through their efforts we had key government representatives attend the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abuki. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I'd like to note the state government's media releases in the last 48 hours in relation to the state housing targets and put on public record the fact that they have shaved just 1,500 new homes off the target that was originally set at 67,000 and reduced now to 65,500. That's just 2.2% lower than the original target. I won't suggest a motion at this point in time, but I encourage the CEO and our media team to issue a media release to correct the record, which essentially says that Boroondara has previously clamped down on home growth in the state government's media release, which I believe is inaccurate, and the record should be corrected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to acknowledge the tremendous success of the Ashburton Festival, which occurred yesterday, and particularly acknowledge the Ashburton Traders Association, the work of Alex Hume, who was crucial to ensuring the day went off well, and to Bob Stensel for his continuing dedication to our vibrant shopping and cultural and community spirit in Ashburton. It was a great event. I was joined by yourself, Mayor, also Councillor Mal Osborne-Smith. I believe we had both federal and state members and also a minister. So Ashburton is on the rise.
Thank you, Councillor Friend Pereira. Any other items of general business? Councillors, are there any items of urgent business? No. We will now move to item 10, confidential business. Councillors, I'm just waiting for a motion to appear on the screen. Just waiting for a motion. Councillors, I have a procedural motion on the screen to close the meeting to the public. If you can please review that. And do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Hollingsworth.
So moved, thank you.
And a seconder, Councillor Fran Pereira.
I think we need to include a, sorry, don't we need to include a second?
We do one at a time.
Oh, one at a time. Second.
Anyone opposed? All those in favour? I declare the motion to close the meeting carried. And we're open. Councillor Fran Pereira.
Thank you. I would like to move the motion as shown on the screen.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pattis.
Yes.
Is anyone opposed? Councillor Fran Pereira, would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
Now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. No, we have to close it. We have do I have a motion to close the meeting?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to request we go back into confidential to discuss another matter. Thank you.
Do I have a second? Councillor Pattis?
Yes.
Anyone opposed? All those in favour? I declare the meeting confidential.
So she can request it. And you put the motion in separate parts. So you put item 2 and item 3.
Yep.
This variation.
Councillor Sinfield, are you happy to put a separate motion?
I am happy to split the motion as best as governance thinks that this can be split.
So we think it would be that we're putting the motion is items 2 and 3. You happy with that?
What should we do with regard to item 1? You would resolve that the matter be deferred and referred back to council.
Okay, so we resolve that for item 1, the matter be deferred and be brought back to council at a later date. And item 2 and 3 as the officer recommendation.
This variation.
Just change it please to different. So it's the motion, so I'll put deferred.
This is on the first one, and we'll deal with that. Then we're going to deal with the other one. Defer consideration.
Councillor Sinfield, are you happy to move the motion now on the screen? That's the first of the split.
Yes, I am, but I thought that that was the one seeking to be deferred.
No, we're deferring one.
Okay.
It's items, I think, yeah,
Then
you
I-
might have had it flipped around.
Then I might leave it to the ward councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to move the motion on the screen?
Happy
Thank
to
you.
move the motion. Thank
Do I
you.
have a seconder? Councillor Sinfield?
Just a second.
Anyone opposed? All those in favour? I declare the motion carried.
Okay, so now we need a motion to defer. Yeah.
Councillors, I'm looking for a motion to defer the original item 1. Councillor Fran Pereira?
I'm happy to move, I think it's a procedural motion 2, adjournment of debate indefinitely. Is that what you're looking for, Brian?
Procedural amendment 4. Lay the matter on the table.
We're going to lay the matter on the table, procedural amendment 4. Happy
Number
to
4.
do that.
I'm happy to move number 4 then.
And can I have a seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth?
Sorry, I just seek clarification on what we're actually moving.
We're going to lay this matter on the table.
The screen hasn't caught up yet.
It's coming.
I do.
And second that? Oh, you're
I proposed it.
Councillor Friend-Pereira, are you happy with that motion that's on the screen? Item 1 in relation to the variation of the contract down the bottom.
I am.
Councillor Hollingsworth, you happy to second that?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone opposed? I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? I declare the motion carried. This brings us to the end of the order of business for this meeting. Thank you all who have joined us in the gallery and online this evening, and I now declare this council meeting closed. Thank you.